Imagine this, a packed hall of world leaders, cameras flashing, every word measured, every moment scripted, until suddenly, a king breaks protocol. In the middle of his formal address, King Charles III paused, looked out over the room, and focused his gaze, not on politicians or aristocrats, but on a small group of Filipino attendees. And then, in a moment that no one expected, he said, "The resilience, kindness, and dedication of Filipinos are something the world must learn from. You don't just serve, you love." The room froze. Jaws dropped. Even seasoned diplomats were visibly moved. Because in that instant, King Charles wasn't just speaking as a monarch. He was honoring a nation often unseen, yet deeply essential. It wasn't flattery, it wasn't politics, it was truth. And for millions of Filipinos across the globe, caregivers, nurses, workers far from home, it felt like the world had finally paused to see them. When the most powerful voices acknowledge those who serve quietly, it doesn't just validate their worth, it rewrites how the world sees them. For decades, Filipinos have played vital roles across British society, especially in healthcare, hospitality, and caregiving. Yet, they've remained largely invisible in mainstream narratives. Working behind the scenes, they kept families together, patients alive, and communities functioning, often without a single word of thanks. Until now. King Charles's recognition wasn't just historic, it was the first time a monarch openly acknowledged the Filipino community's deep-rooted contributions. In his words was something more than gratitude. It was a long overdue correction of history. When invisible heroes are finally seen, it not only dignifies their work, it inspires new generations to stand taller in their service. And for many Filipinos watching, especially the children of overseas workers, that single moment felt like justice. Not in a legal sense, but in the deeply human need to be acknowledged. For years, stories of sacrifice have lived quietly in hospital wards, care homes, and late-night phone calls back home. King Charles's words lit a torch where there was once only quiet labor. They reminded the world that behind Britain's strength are hands that often go unnoticed, and hearts that never stopped giving. Behind Britain's celebrated healthcare system lies an underappreciated truth. Filipino professionals are its beating heart. From NHS hospitals to private care homes, Filipinos are often the first to arrive and the last to leave. They clean wounds, comfort patients, and sit beside the dying, not out of obligation but out of love. Filipinos make up a large share of the UK's nursing workforce, but statistics don't tell the whole story. These professionals bring something beyond skill. They bring compassion rooted in culture and faith. For them, caregiving isn't just a task, it's an act of devotion. British families often say, "It's like having family care for you," when describing Filipino caregivers. And that's not just a compliment, it's a testament to the warmth they carry across oceans. Filipinos don't just heal bodies, they heal spirits, making healthcare more human in the process. Why do Filipinos care so deeply? The answer lies in a deep cultural foundation. With over 80% identifying as Catholic, their view of work is shaped by a belief in service as a sacred calling. Helping others isn't just a duty, it's spiritual fulfillment. These values are passed down through generations. Cultural and spiritual values shape how we serve, turning ordinary jobs into extraordinary acts of love. Service becomes second nature, ingrained in their identity. They carry a cultural legacy of compassion abroad. Recognition honors an entire way of life. The connection between Filipinos and the British royal family goes deeper than most know. In the final years of Queen Elizabeth II, it was Filipino nurses and caregivers who stood beside her. They weren't in photographs, they didn't make headlines, but they were there, day and night, offering comfort to one of history's most iconic figures. Insiders have shared that it was Filipinos who helped ensure the Queen received not just medical attention, but emotional warmth and human dignity in her final days. They worked through exhaustion, they gave her joy and peace, and they asked for nothing in return. The fact that the royal family trusted Filipinos at their most vulnerable moments speaks volumes. Behind closed palace doors, these workers carried the weight of history with unmatched grace. Trust is earned in silence, and when the highest institution in a nation entrusts you with its legacy, you've proven your worth beyond measure, And yet, this trust wasn't built overnight. It was forged through years of quiet loyalty, humility, and excellence. For many Filipino caregivers, serving in royal or aristocratic households isn't about prestige. It's about showing up with integrity, day after day, in both mundane and sacred moments. From preparing meals with care to sitting silently beside a patient in pain, these small acts of presence are what leave the deepest imprint. They serve not for recognition, but from a place of deep responsibility, and in doing so, they become part of stories that history often forgets to write down. When COVID-19 gripped the UK, thousands of Filipino healthcare workers stepped into danger without hesitation. Some left their families for months, others risked infection and exhaustion, and many never made it home. One nurse in London worked 18-hour shifts with barely any rest. Another, though infected, refused to leave her post. Their contributions held up the entire healthcare system. Without them, the UK's pandemic response would have collapsed. Yet even in the face of death, they never demanded recognition, only the chance to keep helping. True courage doesn't need applause, but when it's finally acknowledged, it can rewrite a nation's gratitude. For the families they left behind, their sacrifice was more than just noble. It was deeply personal. Children grew up without parents for months. Elderly parents waited by the phone every night. These were not just workers on the front lines, they were mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters carrying two worlds on their shoulders. Their absence at home was the price of presence in someone else's crisis. Through every sleepless night and teary video call, they stood firm. Because to them, saving lives is not just a profession, it's a promise. What King Charles said may seem small to some, but to millions of overseas Filipinos, it was revolutionary. In one speech, a monarch shattered stereotypes and gave voice to the voiceless. He reframed migrant workers not as laborers, but as builders of compassion-driven societies. For too long, migrant communities have been seen only for their utility, not their humanity. This speech was a milestone. It placed dignity where it had long been missing. And more importantly, it invited the world to see Filipino workers not as expendable, but as essential. Now other nations may take notice. Perhaps more leaders will follow this example. Perhaps the narrative around overseas workers will finally begin to shift. Sometimes all it takes is one voice at the top to restore dignity to millions working at the bottom. But the true power of King Charles's words lies in what they unlock. Not just recognition, but reflection. For Filipino families watching from afar, it was a moment of pride that validated years of silent sacrifice. For young Filipinos growing up abroad, it was a message that said, your heritage is honorable, your story matters. And for the world, it was a gentle challenge to look beyond job titles and uniforms and finally see the heart, history, and humanity behind the service. This story isn't just about King Charles or the royal family. It's about the quiet, selfless service of a people whose worth has long been ignored. It's about Filipino workers, the unsung heroes who have kept nations running, cared for the forgotten, and sacrificed comfort for the sake of duty. They don't do it for the headlines. They don't seek medals, but they do deserve respect. And when a king says, "We couldn't do this without you," it echoes louder than any applause. It becomes a statement of global truth, that love, humility, and dedication still matter, and that those who carry them in their hearts, no matter their job title, are the ones who truly move the world forward. To be seen is to be validated, and for those who have given everything, that is the recognition that matters most.